Afternoon, Myrna.
Good morning, Master.
Morning. Minna, how are you? Minna, can you hear me? Minna? Hassan, morning. Hassan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Minna, are you there? Minna?
Yes, Mister.
So you are 3 students. Okay, guys, let's start. Looks like other people will take time. If you remember, we did lesson 11. Let's go to the beginning of the lesson just to remember the structure of adjective clauses. We did part 1. We did exercise 11.1, if you remember, and part 2 we did exercise 11.2, and now we're going to do part 3, and the title of part 3 is creating and moving relative pronouns. Sometimes we need to move the place of the relative pronoun, especially if it is deleted, to know the meaning of the sentence. One of the distinctive characteristics of adjective clauses is that they begin with relative pronouns. We all agree on this. When the relative pronoun plays the role of subject in its own clause, the relative pronoun is automatically at the beginning of the adjective clause. But again, when it plays the role of the subject, it comes at the beginning of the adjective clause. The relative clause or the relative pronoun comes at the beginning of the adjective clause. But how do all the other non-subject relative pronouns get to the beginning of the adjective clause? Because if it's an object, if it's the object of a preposition, of course it's not at the beginning, but it gets or reaches the beginning. How? Answer, we must move all non-subject relative pronouns to the beginning of the adjective clause. How can we do this? Of course, you are good enough to do this automatically without learning the theory, I know, but let's read the theory. Just read the theory quickly. We will now look at this complex process in more detail. All adjective clauses start out as statements that use the antecedent noun in some role within the adjective clause. The antecedent must be in the underlying adjective clause, or else the adjective clause would not be a statement about the antecedent. Yani the antecedent would or should be somewhere near the relative clause or the adjective clause. In all the examples below, we will put the underlying adjective clause in the underlying adjective clause here means the clause that includes the antecedent in parentheses. To remind us that this underlying clause must be converted to an actual relative clause. The repeated antecedent noun is involved. Let's see the example. And we have 2 steps here. Replace the antecedent. When we see the examples, everything will be clear and easy. Replace the antecedent with the appropriate relative pronoun. You can replace it with that, if you need that, with who, with whom, with where, with when. Okay? Move the relative pronoun to the first position. Put it at the beginning of the adjective clause. We'll move it to the first position of the adjective clause. Let's look here at the examples. Look at this example. They own some property. And then the underlying clause is put between parentheses, which has the repeated noun here. They want to sell the property. The first step is to replace the repeated noun here with the suitable pronoun. They own some property. Property here is an object, right? So, and it's non-human. So we replace it with that. This is the first step. The second step, move that here. Put it at the beginning of the relative or adjective clause. They own some property that they want to sell, a piece of cake, right? Here is a second example, but this time the antecedent noun is human. With the non-human, we use that, as you know. I met the teacher. This is, and here between brackets or parentheses, we have the underlying sentence which had the repeated noun, the teacher, and this is human. And the human, the teacher here is the object. So with object, when it's a human, we use whom. So I met the teacher. You like the teacher so much. We replace the teacher with the word whom, again, because it's an object here. So I met the teacher, you liked whom so much, and then we pull whom and put it here at the beginning of the relative or adjective clause. I met the teacher whom you liked so much. Here are some examples of antecedent nouns playing each of the remaining roles. Again, we are talking about the roles which don't include the subject, because the subject normally in the subject clause, or when the relative clause begins with the subject, normally comes at the beginning. But when there is another role or another function, we need to pull the relative pronoun and put it at the beginning of the clause. Object of a preposition. This is another role. I got the iPod. I was telling you about the iPod. This is the underlying clause, which includes the noun, which will be replaced by the relative pronoun. Step one, the iPod here is the object, okay? But here it is the object of a preposition. So step one, I got the iPod and replace the object of a preposition with the pronoun that, because it's non-human. Step two, I got the iPod and put that at the beginning of the clause and put it here. I got the iPod that I was telling you about. In the possessive place, role, I called upon I called up the man. I found the man's dog. I called up the man. I found the man's dog. Here we have position, the man's dog. So I called up the man. I found, or position, we use whose, the possessive pronoun. I found whose dog. I called the man, pull whose along with the word dog. They must be one unit, pulled at the beginning here. If I called up the man whose dog I found. Notice that when we move a possessive pronoun, we must also move the noun that the possessive modifies. And whose dog? In the example above, whose dog moves as a single unit. Spatial, when we say spatial, we remember place or space, and we remember the word where, as you know. I know the building, he works in the building. So the word building is repeated, and here we have a preposition. Step one, we replace this phrase with the relative pronoun used to refer to space or place, which is where. But I know the building, he works where. Step two, pull where to here at the beginning of the relative or adjective clause. I know the building where he works. Temporal means time or when. 6 p.m. was the time. We had agreed to meet at the time. Step one, instead of this phrase, prepositional phrase, we put when and then pull when to the beginning of the adjective clause and so on. The adverbial relative pronoun where, or pronouns where and when, replace the entire adverbial prepositional phrase. Again, and we can say where replaces an entire prepositional phrase, including the preposition itself, when the same stuff. Okay? So side 13, Exercise 13. Use the two-step process to form an adjective clause from the underlying sentence, as we did. The first question is done as an example. We took the road. The guidebook recommended the road. But the first step, we replace the word road or the road with the pronoun that, because it's non-human. And then we pull that and put it at the beginning of the underlined clause, which is the adjective clause now. So we took the road that the guidebook recommended. I'll give you a minute or two to do number 1 and 2 only, and then move to the next step. So if you're ready to do number 1, put your hand up, please. I have Minna. Okay, Minna, go ahead.
We learned that from the student who we met on the campus tour.
We learned that from the students who, Minna, you said who? WHO, right?
Yes.
But here we met the students. What the function or what the role of the word students here? Is it subject or object, Minna?
Object.
So with objects, we use who or whom? We talk about standard English. Okay? So it should be we learned that from the students. Whom we met on the campus tour. Okay? Thank you, Minna. Number 2. Who can do number 2? I have Mirna. Okay, Mirna. Go ahead.
The police were searching the area where the campers had last been seen.
Were good in that area, because we have a preposition, spatial phrase, where the campers had last been seen. Thank you very much. Thank you both, Minna and Mirna. Let's move to the next part. Deleting relative pronouns. You know, relative pronouns are deleted sometimes. And let's look quickly at the example. I called the people. They had selected the people. So the word the people is repeated, and the people here is object. So step 1, we replace, as we did above. I called the people. They had selected whom, because it's object here. I called the people whom they had selected. We have an optional step. We can delete the pronoun whom as long as it is 1, an object, 2, object of a preposition. I call the people. We can leave whom here, whom they had selected, like step 2, or I call the people they had selected, and I'm sure you know this better than me. So note, we will use the null symbol, phi, to represent an element that has been deleted from the sentence or can be deleted. We saw the movie. You recommended the movie. Step 1, we saw the movie. You recommended that, and then put it in its place. We saw the movie that you recommended. And step 3, we can delete the word that because it replaces an object. Here are some more examples of deleted relative pronouns playing non-subject roles. Of course, subject or subjects can be deleted. We talk about non-subjects. Object of a preposition. The issue that they had been arguing about, has been resolved. The issue that they had been arguing about has been resolved. Here we have the preposition about. This is why we can delete the word that. Spatial. Do you know a place where we can get a cup of coffee? Or do you know a place we can get a cup of coffee? Okay. I can remember a time when we would to such and such, or we would to such and such. We cannot delete possessive relative because we would be left with an ungrammatical fragment of a noun phrase like the example. I called up the man whose dog. Can I delete whose here? Read it without whose كده. I called up the man dog I found. It's meaningless. It doesn't make any sense. So I can delete, or we can delete, the possessive relatives or relative pronouns. This option for or of deleting non-subject relative pronouns is commonly used. In fact, in conversation, they say it's about 5%. This is a statistic we don't need. When the relative pronoun is deleted from the beginning of an adjective clause, the truncated relative clause is much more difficult to recognize. The deleted or the cut off relative clause is difficult to recognize for the obvious reason that the relative pronoun, the flag word, it is the flag word from which we know that this is an adjective clause, right? So here, all of the following sentences contain an unidentified adjective clause with a deleted relative pronoun. Underline the adjective clause and confirm your answer by restoring the appropriate relative pronoun at the beginning of the adjective clause. The first question is done as an example. I answered the only question I got. Here, something is deleted. So the relative clause is underlined here, but where is the flag? Where is the flag? Where is the pronoun? So I answered the only question that I got. That I got. We're going to do number 1 and 2 only. Can you do number 1 and 2? Percent, can you do it? Can you do number 1? Percent, can you hear me? Percent, are you above ground? Okay, Omar, are you there? Omar,
أيوة مثل حضرتك.
can you do number 1? Were you following up, Omar? Do you understand what we are doing?
أيوة مثل عموديهم.
Shall I explain again the example?
لا I know.
Okay. So underline the adjective clause and say what pronoun is deleted. We really like the color you painted in the living room. Sorry, you painted the living room.
We really like the color you painted. The color that you painted and the
2 steps in 1. Okay. So the first step is we underline this clause, right? Because it's the adjective clause, and the deleted pronoun is that, as you said. Thank you, Omar. Sentence 2. Is Basant back, guys? Basant? So Minna or Mirna? Who wants to answer number 2? Okay, Minna, go ahead. Minna?
Underline we saw
We
till the end.
We saw, okay. We saw
And the children whom.
the children whom, right?
Yes.
With an M, right? Can I hear well?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the last part of the lesson 5, or part 5, sorry. Moving objects of prepositions. We talked about moving objects. It's the same idea, nothing new. The second area in which there is an option in how relative pronouns are treated is what or when antecedent nouns play the role of object of a preposition. Let us take as an example the following underlying sentence. The underlying sentence is the sentence which has the repeated word which is replaced by the relative pronoun. We met the new senator. We met the new senator. So much has been written about the new senator. So the first step is the same. We replace the new senator with by the preposition, the pronoun, the suitable pronoun, because we have the object of a preposition. I'll use whom because they talk about a human being. Step 2 has an option. We can move the relative pronoun. We can do it in two ways, as you know. To the first position of the adjective clause, as we have done before, producing. Look, we met the new senator, whom, and we leave the preposition at the beginning. Or we can move the preposition here before the pronoun, like here. We met the new senator about whom so much has been written. Another example, can get another example. This is the story. This is the story. I told you about the story yesterday, but this is the story which I told you about, or about which I told you yesterday, right? Both of these alternatives are fully grammatical. It's okay to put the pronoun and then leave the preposition at the end, or put the preposition directly before the pronoun. Both are fully grammatical, both are okay. However, there is substantial difference between practices in spoken language and formal written language. When we are speaking, except for the most formal, almost ceremonial occasions, we would move the relative pronoun by itself. Okay, this is more formal. In formal written language, many writers would move both the preposition and the relative pronoun. This choice reflects a traditional, if somewhat old-fashioned, reluctance to end sentence with a preposition. Okay, was a tradition. With non-human antecedents, the alternative of moving the preposition is a little more complicated because we have to use the relative pronoun which, not that this time. We use which after a preposition, we replace that with which in step 1 instead of the usual relative pronoun that. Look at the example. We rented the movie. We heard so much about the movie. So the movie is non-human and it's the object of a preposition. So we replace it with which. Okay. Step 2, we rented the movie about which we heard so much. If we move the preposition, we no longer have the option of deleting the relative pronoun. We can't delete it. We can't say about we heard so much. It would be meaningless. This sentence is wrong. We rented the movie about we, as we said, we can't delete. We don't have this option here. The last exercise of this lesson is 11.5. Turn the following underlying sentences into two different forms of adjective clauses. The one with the the pronoun and the preposition at the end, the pronoun at the beginning and the preposition at the end, or the pronoun followed or preceded by the preposition. The first where the relative pronoun has moved by itself, and the second where the relative pronoun and the preposition move together. The first question is done as an example. Basant, be ready, Basant. I know you're back. The new conductor, and the underlying sentence is we, or close. We just learned about the new conductor. Is from Germany. So the new conductor, whom, because it's the preposition, the object of the preposition. We just learned about is from Germany, and we can say the new conductor about whom both again, as the writer said here, fully grammatical. The pronoun only and the preposition left at the end, or the pronoun preceding the preposition preceding the pronoun. Sentences 1 and 2. Sentences 1 and 2. Okay. If you're ready, Basant, go ahead.
The gate that we had driven earlier through was closed by the police.
The gate that
Which
okay, which we
the gate
the
through
gate.
which we had driven earlier was closed by the
Okay,
police.
thank you. Number 2, who can do it? Number 2, Mirna, can you do number 2?
The story on which we reported last night has become national news, and the story we reported last night, which we reported last night on, has become national news.
Okay, it's better to put on after reported. We reported on last night, right?
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Yes.
I had-
Has become national news.
No problem, no problem. Thank you very much. I'll end the first session here, and I intended to make the second session for the guys who didn't attend the Wolf with us. I'm not sure why nobody else joins us. Thank you very much, guys. I think the 4 of you attended Beowulf with us, the part we studied so far. Am I right?
Yes.
Do you have any question about the part we did, Omar?
No, thank you, Mr. Muhammad.
Are you sure, Minna?
No, thank you, Mr.
Right, okay. Thank you very much. I'll end here. Okay. See ya.
Bye-bye, Mr.
Bye.